I'm going to introduce myself now. I'm Edward Hanna, and I will be leading this conversation this morning with my two co-panelists, Tony Giannakis, joining us from Energy Action, which is where I'm coming from, and also we're honoured and blessed to have Jeremy Halstead joining us from Shell Energy in Australia on our call today as well. Just as people come into the call, I might just move the slide along and I guess just frame our conversation a little bit today with some observations made by the Secretary General of the UN at the very start of this month, back in early March. There's certainly plenty of food for thought here. If there's one message Mr. Guterres is trying to make pretty clear to us all, is that a greater sense of urgency than governments and populations around the world have been able to exhibit thus far is required if we are to limit global warming over the course of this century and beyond. The other key point that I'd just like to draw your attention to, I think it's really well made here, the energy transition, which is what we will be discussing this morning, is really fundamental to the process of decarbonising the planet and reducing humanity's impact on the planet. We'll explore that through the course of the morning, as well as a couple of other key ideas for us here in Australia, with the support of Tony and Jeremy. Yeah, I guess I should pause actually and take a moment to just outline for you all what we expect to be talking to you about this morning. So actually I'll pause and I'll let Tony do our acknowledgement of country.
Thanks, Edward. So yes, of course, in the spirit of reconciliation, Energy Action acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and the connections to the land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
Many thanks, Tony. I'm here on Gadigal land here in Sydney and joined by my colleagues in Melbourne. Yeah, we acknowledge the owners, the Indigenous owners of the Australian land. As we get into the subject matter and introduce ourselves, we should probably offer the other framing device that it's St. Patrick's Day today. If you want to grab a Guinness to celebrate that element of culture, then that's okay with us. Look, some of the key ideas that we're going to work through today, we really want to talk through how important it is to get the energy grid to net zero as soon as we possibly can here in this country, what it means, what are some of the challenges. Jeremy from Shell can step us through some perspectives from not just a really important energy market participant here in Australia, but also from a global perspective as well. The other key message that we want to bring to you today is that the market has solutions now. There are ways that you can achieve net zero for energy in 2022. Energy Action is ready to be your partner to help you on that journey, and Shell too has some great tools, some great services, some great products, and is a powerful partner as well for getting to net zero in 2022, or indeed in your own time frame. Other key messages, it's the responsibility of us all. We can't rely just on regulators and suppliers to get us there. It's going to take governments, it's going to take consumers and us as commercial and business consumers to act and make decisions in favour of renewable energy and net zero to bring the timeframes that Mr. Guterres is making so clear to us to fruition. Last key point, and we'll get there over the course of this conversation, is that having an informed plan, and hopefully we can help you in that respect today, and a budget is a really important starting point to a strategy and an effective pathway to net zero. So without any further ado, if I may quickly introduce myself, my name's Edward Hanna. I've been in the industry for 25 odd years now, and here at Energy Action, developing products and solutions for our customers for a good portion of that, right across the, I guess, the consumer end of the energy value chain. So working in market-based solutions, working through data solutions, working in energy efficiency, working in microgrids. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce Tony Giannakis as well.
Thanks, Edward. Yes, my name is Tony Giannakis. I've been in the energy industry now for just on 10 years. I work as the business development manager here, and I guess my job here, working closely with our clients, is to simplify what people such as Edward and Jeremy bring to the table. The energy industry can be very complex, which you will find throughout the course of this webinar. However, I will try to simplify it where I can and bring in some live scenarios of how these solutions work, but also don't work for our clients.
Great. And Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Shell, and thank you, Jeremy.
No problem. Yeah, so like Edward and Tony, I've been in the industry for quite some time now, longer than I care to remember, frankly. And it's mostly in consulting, looking after a range of functions, both in the UK and Australia. And more recently with Shell Energy, and I lead the structured product sales team, which covers off a lot of different products, which include the things we will discuss today. So yes, this is a key area of focus for me. Great,
thank you, Jeremy. And I should mention up front that that Jeremy is a member of the Energy Action, Energy Advice Diaspora. We did work quite closely a number of years ago. On the consulting in the client consulting space, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and it's a real tribute to Shell's position in the market, that you're there doing great work for them, and we really value the relationship we do have with Shell.
Thank you very much, and likewise.
Cool. All right, so look, just to kick off, I wanted just to set a bit of a scene here for us all. We know about net zero. We know about some of the key issues around reducing emissions to therefore reduce global warming. We understand that there are different types of emissions associated with different activities. Where we really want to focus this conversation today is around the Scope 2 emissions of businesses. Okay, so that's as energy consumers, we're really talking about your emissions associated with your grid energy purchases, and specifically your electricity purchases. Okay, so that's the conversation, and we're really going to focus and drill down into how do we achieve net zero for energy, and specifically electricity. Why is it so important? Look, it's so important because emissions associated with electricity, we can see on the graph in the bottom left corner of the page here, are a substantial portion in their own right of Australia's reported and reportable greenhouse emissions. There's some fantastic data made available by the Department of Industry and Science. The website's down in the bottom corner. I'll mention, guys, we are recording this session, and we'll make both the deck and the recording available to all attendees following this session, so don't feel the need to take notes. Fantastic data sets there presented by Department of Industry, and we can see there that in 2021, even after quite a few years now of the decarbonisation of the energy grid, that emissions associated with electricity production in Australia represent more than 30% of our total emissions budget. More significantly, when we look out to the future, and we'll look at a couple of charts that try and demonstrate this, once you think about the solutions to emissions, particularly in the transport sector and some of the stationary industry and industry processing related emissions, a whole lot of those solutions are fundamentally around the electrification, so substituting gas and oil for electricity. over time, and therefore getting the grid right, getting the grid to a point where it's highly renewable and its emissions are as low as possible are really critical for Australia and for the world in general to reduce their emissions. And Australia, indeed, blessed as we are with some space and some sunshine and a bit of wind and water, are in a really powerful position globally over the next few decades if we do get this transition right. Okay, looking at what's going on from a market perspective, before I ask Jeremy a couple of questions, we can see there's a couple of different lenses through which we can see what's happening to the decarbonisation of the grid. The first lens there, this is an AEMO forecasting and planning report extract produced earlier this year. It's telling us that they've got a pretty close eye on how much coal and gas is planned to withdraw from the market over the next few years. You know, what has been announced versus what has not been announced. It's also showing us what's proposed in respect of new solar, new wind, either anticipated, proposed, completed, coming in to resolve this problem. When we look at this, certainly when we look at this from our side, Jeremy, we see a lot of change and disruption ahead of us, a lot of volatility, which will be expressed through pricing, hopefully not too much in terms of interruptibility of the grid. But we also see the need to ensure that the signals are there from consumers to encourage that solar and wind investment, as well as the storage and the firming capability to ensure that as coal and gas is withdrawn, it's taken up. There is investment coming in the form of other energy technologies, I should say. As we jump into this, Jeremy, can you tell us what this energy transition means for Shell, globally and perhaps more importantly here in Australia?
Happy to. So, stating the obvious, but Shell recognises very much the need to tackle climate change as an urgent challenge. We, in order to make that happen, we have set on our own back, we have a net zero target, and ahead of that, we have short and medium term carbon intensity targets. The end goal being to be consistent with the Paris Agreement and to do our bit to help limit the average rise of temperatures to 1.5 degrees. Our targets also include the energy we sell as well as the energy we produce. So Shell is doing its bit to do limit emissions on Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3, which is, for Shell, organisations large as Shell, that is quite a task, but there is a strong focus on decarbonisation, and that applies both at a global level and within Australia. Looking at Australia specifically, it's a major market for Shell with some significant investment over many, many years. The reasons that we have invested here as much as we have are that there's a very strong growth in renewables, and there's clear customer demand for renewable products and services, like a lot of other countries, but Australia particularly. The practical application of that is this month we signed an agreement to acquire 49% of Westwind, a wind generator, which they have 3 gigawatts of projects in the pipeline, and it complements a number of other acquisitions over the last few years that talk about or address carbon offsetting and renewable generation generally. So Shell is a heavy investor in Australia and is looking to build on that with the products and services we offer. So without getting too much into it, yes, it is a key focus.
And look, we're obviously in a market in transition, and Shell is exposed to markets and an investor in markets globally. We saw the Greenpeace reports early February, an attempt to rank energy retailers here in Australia by their impact on the environment. Obviously, Shell's an incumbent with a legacy position, but looking to a future that is decarbonised. How do you think buyers should use these ranking systems in their purchasing decisions.
Sure. So things like the Greenpeace report, where they can help consumers make informed choices, that's just generally helpful, and that's a good thing. The Greenpeace report, I mean, it takes a lot of complex information and summarizes it, and frankly, the way they do it is quite thorough and it brings it together. It does mean, though, it's quite a high-level report. It from a commercial consumer perspective, it doesn't list all the retailers that can make offers to commercial consumers. There's a bit more focus on residential consumers. I think as well we can draw out the point that commercial consumers businesses, when they're looking at their electricity options, they have a lot more options to consider than would a householder contract would have. And so whilst the report and that kind of report is very useful, really getting some specific advice about your circumstances and what products and services meet your strategy, that usually is a good idea, because you need that more targeted information, I would say, in order to help get the right strategy.
I would agree. I'd agree, Jeremy. And look, the ESG sector as a sector is very high profile, and a lot gets said about the ESG sector when we're working through with our clients on making statements in relation to energy and evaluating their suppliers. We really try and draw their attention to the contract that they're signing. That's really the client's investment in the transition, and the quality of that contract and what it is saying or representing in regards to emissions reduction, from our point of view, is much more important than general observations about a brand. Which is not to say that those observations don't have resonance internally with other stakeholders, but we're on a process to try and educate everybody we're working with that it's the contract that matters. Okay, look, Jeremy, just as we look at some of the other charts here, I've pulled in some modelling from AEMO in respect of the step change in emissions, some scenario work they've done in their integrated system plan. The most likely scenario, according to AEMO's polling of various market pundits, is this step change scenario here, right, where we get concerted effort from governments, maybe. We get effort from suppliers such as Shell and other investors in the market. We get effort from regulators, and certainly we get the concerted effort of consumers to lead this change. There's an expectation, they're driving the expectation that emissions will reduce over the next substantially over the next decade. And on the far right, a bit of an exploration too of what might happen if Australia can successfully navigate not just the electrification of the transport sector and other sectors across our economy, but also what opportunities present for Australia if we can nail the chance to become a hydrogen superpower. As you're thinking about the needs of your customers over the next 3, 5, 10 years, Jeremy, what risks do you expect them to be exposed to, and where do you need to give guidance for your customers as you look out to the future in respect of these changes?
Sure. I mean, generally, Shell's perspective as a retailer is we would try to minimize the risks to our customers face. Typically, retailers are in a better position to manage those wholesale risks. But I mean, quickly, and there's quite a few to run through, but essentially supply and demand is a lot more complex to manage. The switch to more distributed generation, more interconnected grid, and more variable generation makes it just a more complex proposition. There's no other aspects such as the more complex requirements from consumers too, frankly, and I think we'll come to it shortly, Ed, but the change in wholesale prices during the day and other aspects that require more management than the grid used to. So we're talking a more complex environment with more price volatility and a range of factors which have not been there before. And I think, yeah, happy to expand on that in your next slides if you'd like to.
Yeah, let's step into that. Everybody, what I just drawn in for a bit of discussion here is some cost curves. These are global average cost curves. The concept here is the levelized cost of energy. What does it cost once you inject your capital, consider your cost of capital, all of your development costs, and then the maintenance on different generation technologies over the life cycle of their lifetime of their life. We've got some LCOE charts here, which are sort of demonstrating that certainly what we're interested here in Australia, so solar photovoltaics and onshore wind, the cost of generation in US dollars is coming down to less than 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's becoming very competitive on a unit basis with coal and other tech, and certainly coal, which has been the lowest cost of generation here in Australia for many decades. We're used to seeing that at 4 to 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour generally. Jeremy, what do these LCOE charts not tell us? What's not here?
Well, the key point is how you firm that into a fixed price, essentially. So yes, while the cost of generation itself can be quite low, it does not necessarily, if you tell the whole story, if you're taking that energy input and then you are firming it into a fixed price that we offer, retailers offer to customers, then you have to add on other costs to do that. So it's not quite the full picture. Obviously, you can use a range of sources to do it, but yes, you have to present it as a firm price because ultimately that's what consumers will pay. The chart on the right, which looks at operational demand, that was a large part of the story, I would say, which is all to do with that demand over the course of a day, and you can clearly see that demand is hollowing out in the middle of the day with morning and evening peaks, which relate to solar generation and the prevalence of it both behind the meter on people's rooftops and the large solar plants themselves. So what it means is the price distribution during the day is changing quite significantly. So you have to cover the risk of those morning and evening peaks. You also need to change the pricing to reflect the lower cost during the middle of the day, and also deal with the volatility if those generators don't operate as expected. So that ties directly into the price volatility that we're seeing, and that retailers like Shell seek to manage in giving fixed prices to customers.
Yeah, right. So while we might be able to, or solar developers and the market generally can talk about the lower cost of renewable energy, once you consider the challenges of firming, grid stability and other technical challenges, it's not necessarily the case as we move through this transition that renewable energy in the grid will deliver us a lower cost every single day.
No, it is kind of the clear point that, if it sounds too good to be true, that's generally the case. So it's you have to present it as the whole picture.
Yeah. And look, the other key point that I'd like to draw out for our audience here today is when you're looking at your net zero statements and your net zero planning, and we're going to move into that section in a little bit. By and large, there is an obligation or a requirement for you to be able to report measurable, verifiable steps that you've taken to procure renewable energy. And again, pointing back to, hey, I'm contracted to somebody who's got a big portfolio of renewables, doesn't necessarily meet the requirements of the reporting framework that your organisation may be looking to report through. Hence, we come back to the contract that you're signing, and specifically, we come to the attribute of the renewable energy certificate. Okay, in Australia, the renewable energy certificates are a premium product. They exist under an act of legislation which puts an obligation on energy sellers, such as Shell Australia, to supply a portion of their own energy that they're selling into the market from renewable energy. That's the obligation. That sets a market price. once and sets a framework for those certificates to be created, surrendered, reported, etc. What we've just like to address, bring your attention to, firstly, it's a premium product, so it's additional to the cost of energy. And secondly, as we can see from the chart on the right-hand side of some wholesale renewable energy certificates, some large-scale generation certificates traded in the market over the last 12 months, we can see the forward prices of certificates moving substantially. So that dark blue line, March 21, in March 21, we were doing some great work for some of our clients, buying them energy certificates at less than $15 a megawatt hour, or less than 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour premium. In the lead up to COP26, and a lot of activity here in Australia and around the planet by organisations to declare their intent around net zero, we saw that price really firm and head up, to 2.5 to 3 cents out to the future. That trend has continued to the point where what we can see in the market at the moment, we are seeing certificates plus 4 cents, 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour out to the future, the near future. Okay. Jeremy, can you give us a bit of a background, bit of discussion here as to what's happening underneath those prices?
Happy to. So LGC prices, like any other traded commodity, they respond to supply and demand. If you look back over the history of LGCs, they've been pricing has been really quite volatile. When the scheme was in growth phase, when it was potentially being grandfathered, and then when the available generation of LGCs didn't quite meet demand, and over the course of the last few years, or that's how it's perceived. So anyway, it's moved around quite a bit. The most recent common trend you've picked up there, really, Ed, is the growth in voluntary demand. That has been the key factor, and you can quite clearly see it there, that looking at the March 22 price curve, you've got that the whole forward curve of LGCs has increased, particularly toward the back end of the curve as you get out toward 2030. So yeah, voluntary demand is perhaps the key factor behind that rising price trend. I will say that Shell, the Shell lawyers would like me to point out that we can't give advice on price trends. But yeah, supply and demand is the key aspect, and the increasing focus from COP26 and other similar policies to really focus people on this has been the key factor behind that rising price.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. And look, we know that there's supply coming to the market, but I think we're seeing a change in strategy from solar developers. There's less reason for them to sell long with these higher prices. It's probably more important than ever to be closely monitoring these price curves out to the future, to look for opportunities as they evolve through the course of a year.
Definitely. The other one is to keep an eye on regulation, because as a highly regulated market, LGCs are unfortunately prone to changes in regulation. That is the other key aspect maybe to think about. Great.
Okay. Look, I'm going to make a few more statements, and then I'm going to just try and start to bring Tony into the conversation a little bit. Tony, I know you like to talk, and I've taken the conch. What we wanted to step through, everybody, now is pathways to net zero. Okay, and I guess a couple of motherhood statements to get us there, right? Firstly, our conversation today is restricted to Scope 2, which is your electricity grid emissions. So step one in addressing your Scope 2 emissions is really to understand your scope and your baseline. Second step, from Energy Action's point of view, is to really be clear about where you're headed in respect of your net zero claims and statements. There are various dimensions to this. First, the most important probably is the trajectory and timeframe that you're looking to establish, and when you want to declare that you're net zero. The other dimension that is really critical is having an awareness across your organization as to what reporting framework you're going to use. How are you going to substantiate your claims of net zero? How are you going to put your claims of net zero up to scrutiny and allow people to understand what you've done and avoid accusations of greenwash? On the right-hand side of the chart of the slide here, I've just made a bit of an attempt to lay out some of the different reporting frameworks which are out there, which our clients are working through. RE100, a scheme really focused on renewable energy and achieving that 100% renewable energy target. The CDP, the Clean Development Protocols, science-based targets initiatives. These first three are all international initiatives driven by United Nations and other organisations under their umbrella, which are referring back to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. And then more locally, a couple of important programs: Green Power, Climate Active, and the CERT program, established under the ENGA legislation, the Australian Federal ENGA legislation. The key points I wanted to draw out is that all of these frameworks are an interpretation back of the UN's Greenhouse Gas Protocol. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol has some important things to say about Scope 2 emissions and how to mitigate or abate them. Firstly, and most importantly, there's a distinction drawn between an offset and a reduction. Okay, so a carbon emission certificate may, sorry, a carbon offset, carbon emission certificate may offset a ton of carbon related to your Scope 2 emissions, but these schemes also are interested in how you're actually reducing your Scope 2 emissions. And there's two standards or two methods for reducing your Scope 2 emissions. The first, which we'll focus on today because it is more generally applicable across the market, is market-based approach, which is really a measure of your purchasing. What certificates are you purchasing and can you report back through the reporting frameworks to demonstrate that you are procuring renewable energy? And the second measure, more difficult for a lot of organisations to impact directly, is the locational method, which is looking at the emissions intensity of the electricity grid in your state, which we know varies from state to state, much higher in Victoria than it is in South Australia or Tasmania at the moment, just due to the different generation mixes. And as a consumer, really the only direct method you can impact that and make a reportable gesture, I suppose, or reportable investment is with behind the meter renewables. So typically solar, sometimes a little bit of wind. So this chart, I really wanted to, this table here, just really draw out that for all of the different quality criteria embedded in these reporting frameworks, the LGC, the large scale generation certificate, meets the criteria of all of the certificates. Carbon offsets do satisfy the climate active standard to the extent that you can report your gross offsets if you're buying energy, including carbon emission offsets, but renewable energy is reportable under climate active as well as a reduction in your Scope 2 emissions. So an important distinction there. Key point here though, guys, is that setting your time frame, your target, and knowing your reporting framework is really critical to understanding what sort of budget you're going to need to set to achieve net zero. Then we need to move in and start thinking about pathways to actually get you renewable energy. I'm going to throw the conch in a moment through to Tony and Jeremy a bit more, just to run through some of the solutions that Energy Action and indeed Shell can work with you on, starting with corporate PPA, solar. We won't spend a lot of time on today. Behind the meter delivers great outcomes as either OPEX or CAPEX, if you're careful with those certificates. Wholesale progressive purchasing of LGCs is a method that we can support you with. Green power certificates are out there. They're measuring something slightly different to Climate Active and the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. There's a product, Energy Action supports the Renewable Energy Supply Agreement, which we want to unpack for you, and then indeed carbon neutral supply, energy supply. So, Tony, can you give us just a quick rundown on how a corporate PPA works and any advice you may have for buyers looking at those?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the corporate PPAs and our clients, the way they look at it, it's a fantastic product that is very powerful. You know, I was talking to a client one day, and we were talking about the powers and perils of a corporate PPA, and he said I was being a little bit dramatic with perils. Explaining through the corporate PPA, you know, as fantastic and powerful as it is, you know, you get long-term pricing certainty, and you get great provenance with your LGCs. The complexities around setting up a PPA, the timeframes it takes. I believe, Edward, you keep mentioning that you need to be, you know, best friends with your lawyer, because you really need to get a deep understanding of the PPA and be 100% certain that that is going to work for you. If entered into incorrectly, you know, a PPA can be very detrimental to business. Therefore, you know, our clients tend to, I won't say avoid a PPA, but tend to go for an easier option in the long run.
Would you concur with that view, Jeremy, just before we move on?
Yeah, I would. I think PPAs, well, the term PPA, people use it to imply that it's a generic product, frankly, and as we all know, there isn't. Each PPA is distinct. It depends on the offer being put forward, the generator, the term, the pricing, the location, lots of things like that. So they're not generic. They do take longer. They're more complex. And for some consumers, that is entirely appropriate and the kind of way they want to go. I'd suggest, though, most energy consumers, they don't really want to take on the kind of wholesale risk and complication that a PPA can bring. And because fundamentally, it's not their business to manage wholesale energy risk. It's not what they want to do.
Yeah.
So they want a solution that matches their risk profile better and doesn't, you know, ask them those difficult questions about, you know, longer terms or price uncertainty or exposure to derivatives or any of those things. So both a PPA is a perfectly valid product. It just has to match what your strategy and what you want to achieve. And the other very quick point is that from a renewable energy perspective, it's the LGC that matters. And you don't have to agree a PPA to acquire an LGC. So if your target is renewable energy, acquiring and surrendering the LGC is the key point, and you don't have to be that complex to achieve it.
Let's use that as a segue to just quickly come into the next offering then, the progressive purchasing of those LGCs directly. You know, there's a wholesale market out there. You can take a position. Tony, where's a good application for that kind of a product?
Absolutely, another fantastic product, but another one that you have to really be on top of. You know, when used correctly, you know, spreading the risk of your buying of energy to make sure you're averaging your prices down. That's using progressive purchasing correct. You know, the old stock market, buy low, sell high. Well, in this case, it's buy low. You know. Other people might want to sell high to you, but we want you to buy low. So the most important thing here is to make sure that you're working closely with an advisor that you can fully put, you know, 100% trust into. I would recommend Energy Action. It has a big risk. If you don't play your cards right, there's a real big chance of blowing out your budget. If you don't purchase at the right time, if you don't get in and make a decision quickly as the market moves down, you could miss the boat. You know, we've had instances where clients have not taken our recommendation for whatever reason internally, and then when they were forced to enter into a position, it was not as favourable as it would have been. So, being on top of this, constantly paying attention and making sure you can trust your advisor. And when they say pull the trigger, make sure you go for it.
Yeah. And I know that Jeremy's got lots to say here because I've worked with him closely in these sorts of arrangements in the past, but I'm going to scoot through just watching with an eye on the clock because I want to, I'm going to scoot past green power. I want to just, we might even move on beyond this slide. The renewable energy supply agreement, it's a powerful product that offers provenance of the certificates, fixed price. And I wanted to talk about a deal that, an opportunity that we all worked on together. Tony brought through a very large Victorian client August last year. We ran a competition for renewable energy supply agreements amongst, I think, 6 or 8 suppliers. And Shell, in fact, was the eventual winner. I think, Jeremy, you had the pen in your hand to put that bid together for us. Maybe I'll kick off with Tony. What can you tell us about this, what the client was looking for and what they got out of this renewable energy supply agreement we put together for them?
Definitely. This I might just throw in was one of the biggest highlights of my professional career. This deal, when RESA, Renewable Energy Service Agreement, was announced as something that we're going to push heavily, everyone got excited. And then when we were able to throw it in as an auction as well, just to add in a little bit of the benefit of competitive tension for the retailers, we thought we've got a product here that's going to be great. We went to this client, and the first line that we said was, what if we told you that you could be net zero by July of 22? This was middle of last year. At that time, where the market was, we actually explained to them that if we get in now, you'll actually be able to do this at a cheaper price than what you're currently paying for a non-green agreement. They looked at us in disbelief and said, no, you can't do this. And we showed them how. From the point that they gave us permission to go to market, it took 6, maybe 7 weeks to go from, yes, let's do it, to we have an agreement ready to go that is 100% green. Just it put together all of the benefits of a PPA, puts together all of the benefits of the progressive purchasing, but it also just gives you that peace of mind that you've got a fixed price for your budgets, and a product that you can report and is quite measurable.
So, Jeremy, we saw, thanks, Tony. Jeremy, we saw Shell compete hard to take this opportunity. What was the opportunity for Shell? What drove Shell to want to win this business so badly?
So this particular tender very closely aligned with the products and services that we're looking to promote. Essentially, it was, and the benefits for Shell really reflect the benefits to the customer in many ways. So it's a simple, straightforward process, which enabled a quick decision. It was straightforward for us to manage the risk and complexity of it. We didn't have to develop very complex terms or indeed ask the customer to understand and process them. It's an auditable and provable 100% renewable energy arrangement with marketing rights for the renewable generator involved. And it basically, it also reflects how the grid works in terms of how electrons move around, but the LGC is the bit that proves it. So yes, simple, straightforward, efficient. It achieves the customer's goal. It ties in with Shell's view to have auditable, sensible, and provable renewable supply. And yeah, it worked very smoothly, and we were very keen to win.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, an interesting point about it too. I've just put in chat. I believe it was a 3-year deal. Is that right, guys?
Correct.
In line with the organisation's planning and budgeting processes. Other key point, Jeremy, I'm just going to poke you on this as we wind up. Well away from 2030. 2030 is the end point for the MRET legislation, which in turn supports the large scale generation certificate. Have you got any insight into what might happen to certificates and indeed PPAs with tenure beyond 2030?
So PPAs often beyond, if they go beyond 2030, would state that the buyer would have green rights, whatever they may be, post 2030. That's typically what a PPA says, not always, but typically. What actually happens beyond 2030, at the moment, there's no actual clarity.
Yeah.
And frankly, the RET legislation has been such a political poison chalice that I don't think anyone's particularly keen to grasp it, particularly not at the moment, pre a federal election. But there are some potential instruments they're looking at, maybe looking at other parts of the world for guidance, but frankly, there is no clear guidance. And yeah, it's not a certain position yet.
Yeah. And look, just to emphasize the dangers or the potential risks, sorry, that the client's facing going beyond 2030, I'd just like to draw out that, we saw the LGC price in Australia right now at about 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour under the MRET legislation, and declining down to 2.5 cents or thereabouts. In New Zealand at the moment, the renewable energy certificate price is about 0.2 of a cent. It's a factor of 10 cheaper. So just be aware, guys, that these regulatory changes can have big impacts, as well as the supply, the technology supporting the market. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We're running short of time. We've got a couple of questions. Look, just to wind up, the key messages we really wanted to leave our audience with today. Number one, look, the market has solutions now to help you address the challenge of net zero for energy. Second point, it's really important that you start running conversations in your organisation to price the cost of certificates in if you want to be reporting through a framework, and we can help you with that. Third point, related to that second one, your destination determines your pathway. We can get you to net zero, we can get you there in 2025, we can get you there before 2030 or indeed beyond. But you need to have a budget, have a strategy, and understand your reporting frameworks before you can get into that. And last point, Shell's joining us here today, I think, to really make the point that buying renewable energy doesn't need to be difficult. The corporate PPA is not the only pathway. There are some other pathways that are really good out there for organisations, including our renewable energy supply agreement. Jez, is there anything you'd like to just offer in the vein of tips and tricks and sound advice for energy buyers as we wind up?
Some good old standard comments, such as understanding your site list, having your consumption data to hand, having your contracts to hand, having just a good, clear basis of this is my energy portfolio. The is always sensible, always. The other point we've discussed here is, relevant to this, is before you start diving into product that may suit your renewable energy ambitions, understand the public statements and claims you want to make as an organization. If you know what claims and statements you want to make and targets you want to hit, that makes it significantly easier to understand what products may suit your strategy. If you look at products first, then work out strategy, it's much harder because there's a significant range of products and it usually ends in a rather circular point. So yes, claims, products, and targets. So claims and targets you want to achieve, look at those first.
Yeah. Okay. To close out then, we will spend a moment on questions, but look, we will be in touch with all of the attendees. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Tony, to provide the recording of this session. As well, Tony and some of his colleagues are going to reach out to offer a complementary renewable energy cost pathway. This is the starting point for a conversation. It's not a proposal or a pitch. It's helping you understand what's the likely cost of energy, renewable energy. If you look at it now, what will it be, and start that process of when should we be looking in the market for renewable energy. And when can we connect you with some of our great partners like Shell Australia? Okay, guys, we've gone over time, but a couple of questions have come in. If our audience are willing to stick with us for a few minutes, should we have a crack at trying to answer some of those? We might take the most recent question first. Gavin, thanks for your question. A 3-year deal. We'll have that particular client needing to come back into the market in 2025. It's suddenly starting to look really difficult with Australia's largest coal generator, Origin Energy, announcing its early withdrawal from the market. Tony, how are we going to support that client through that process?
Yeah, definitely. It's been a big talking point, the closure of this generator from Origin. So when we completed this deal, at the time we weren't aware of the fact that there would be a closure of such size. The deal was made at the time that the market was at its lowest. 3 years, we had recommended either 36 months or 48 months. Client chose 36 months, which is perfectly fine. On our side of things, the one thing that we do at Energy Action, and our account managers are fantastic at it here, is making sure that we keep in constant communication with our clients. We will continue to monitor the market. At the point that we believe it's going to be the right time for this client and any other client as well whose current agreements expire in 2025, which there will be quite a few, we will reach out. Our pricing team, constantly let us know, and as soon as it is the time, we will tell this client we believe it's time to go to market now, just based on future commitments.
And Jeremy, look, you made the point earlier about strategy and budgeting, and having certainty over your costs. I imagine from Shell's perspective, that cycle's determined by your customers, not the solar developer. It's the customer that has control over that planning cycle.
For sure. There's only so many things you can control as an energy consumer, but understanding what your budget position, your strategy, and then making a plan to work to it with enough time to deal with fluctuations like, sudden announcements of major generators withdrawing from the market. That's the key, being prepared and having an understanding of the things you can control that way. And also you can broaden that out into a roadmap for your energy costs and your renewable energy arrangements too. So it all feeds back into the same position, which is having a clear plan, having a budget associated with it, and then, working with your appropriate advisor in order to deliver on that. Which all sounds a bit, motherhood, but it's true. It's the simple things that will make it happen.
Yeah. Okay. Looking at another question through from Gavin on the Q&A. Does Energy Action think it's possible to get renewable prices lower than conventional grid power, both now and up to 2030? I might have first crack at that, if that's all right, guys. So look, we put up on screen earlier in the presentation some indicators of the levelized cost of energy. The challenge really will be around, as Jeremy highlighted, firming costs to support renewable power. It's possible. There are renewable power suppliers out there who have very competitive pricing in the market, and they're harnessing their portfolio of generation to offer really competitive pricing. But they still have the challenge of firming that supply, and it's the volatility, I suppose, that we'll see in that stack, that generation technology stack, that will determine whether or not we will get delivered renewable energy prices cheaper than conventional energy prices between here and 2030.
Mm-hmm. We could add to it as well that what makes it renewable is the LGC and the voluntary surrender of that LGC. So irrespective of where your contracting counterparty is, if you don't receive the LGC and you don't voluntarily surrender it, you don't have renewable energy per se. What you have is an agreement based on a notional financial contract with a renewable generator, but someone else is taking that LGC and doing something with it. So very simply, it comes back to who owns the LGC and what you do with it. That's what defines the renewable aspect of that arrangement.
Yeah, gotcha. Great. Okay. And look, a question through from Eckhart. I might throw to you, Jeremy. For microgrids and other large off-grid customers, what solutions are out there?
Well, we've seen a number of customers approach us in regard to microgrids. It's not my area of expertise, quite honestly. We have a team of people who look at that area. So I would defer that to them, quite honestly, because I can't talk about that knowledgeably. I can say, though, that customers who have large areas of land have looked at building their own behind the meter, or occasionally in front of the meter, solar power stations, usually quite small, of circa 5 megawatts. And if you have land and it makes sense for you, then you can look at that. It does expose you, though, to the same issues that any renewable developer will face, such as what return you get and how you connect and how you actually link it to your retail supply as well. Because essentially, if you have a large solar installation that's in front of your meter, it's not directly supplying your site. You need someone to come in and draw the contractual link between your generation and your cost of supply.
Yeah.
And whilst that seems on the face of it quite obvious, actually it's quite complex to do. More simply, though, I mean, like for most energy consumers, looking at the energy efficiency measures you can do on site, then looking at what can you do behind the meter solar on your site. Those are the most obvious ones to look at. And it's not going to suit everyone, but if you have a roof space you can use.
That's right. Yeah.
Those are the common sense things that people would look at.
Yeah, and look, there's I guess the last couple of years we've seen a new breed of market participant emerge where they're willing to put up their capital for the generation, but also storage, and take on the complexity of optimizing the combinations of the solar production, the storage, and playing the markets to get the most out of those assets, and at the same time deliver some price certainty back to the landholder, which is a pretty interesting space. Another question, Julia Christensen's making the point that some group PPAs are getting a better price than their non-renewable energy contracts, which is a great result for local governments. Indeed, we ran a process, I think it was late last year, for Byron Bay Shire, where we brought them a reduction against their conventional energy and in a renewable energy contract through our RESET product. I'd make the point that a lot of this comes down to market timing and what's happening in the markets generally. We're coming off a low contract. It's very difficult to get a discount below that. If we are coming off a high contract, then that opens up all sorts of opportunities. Okay. Guys, we might draw a line under it. We've gone 13 minutes over. We're approaching 12 o'clock. Everyone needs a cup of coffee, and then it's probably time for a Guinness, being St. Patrick's Day and all. Thank you very much, Jeremy and Shell Australia, for making you available. It's been a pleasure to chat with you again and to have your contribution this morning. Tony, thank you as well. It's been great to catch up in this format.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We'll definitely make this available and we'll be in touch with you soon to circulate it.
Great.
Thanks.